pets, next-generation combat, getting jumped by Romulans. These are all just a few of the things on offer in Star Trek Hidden Evil. The question is, though, is it actually a hidden gem or something that should have stayed hidden? Welcome, my name's AZ Ash and welcome to another PC game retrospective video. There's varying opinions on exactly which is the definitive worst Star Trek game. However, one game that always comes up in the conversation is Star Trek Hidden Evil. Now, to be fair to the game, it is based on one of the less popular movies in the franchise, being Star Trek Insurrection. Personally, I don't think Insurrection is a terrible movie. It's got some great action sequences combined with a fairly original main plot. However, the movie certainly takes a long time to get going, along with some fairly uninteresting subplots. Clearly, I wasn't the only one who felt this way, given the movie currently holds a fairly average rating, regardless of the scale. Now, with Insurrection releasing in late 1998, publisher Activision wanted to get a tie-in game out as soon as possible, and this is where things get a little interesting. Developer Presto Studios was given the job to develop this tie-in game, reportedly with one stipulation, that the game had to be shipped by the holiday season of 1999. I mean, the game's box even has a tagline that it was a new adventure for the new millennium, right? This gave Presto about 12 months to develop the title, and it kind of goes without saying that this was an extremely aggressive time frame. Obviously, the result of this development timeline didn't go unnoticed by critics, with one reviewer even labeling the game as clearly rushed during its production. Now, the game was originally produced for Windows PCs, and that's the version we are playing today. As of today, the game is still available to purchase from some digital storefronts. In this case, for the video, I am playing the GOG version, which, while it has some minor modifications to enable the game to be playable on modern PCs, is otherwise the original experience. Story-wise, the game picks up roughly 9 months after the film events and follows the player as the Vulcan-raised human Ensign Sovok. Sovok is joined by Captain Picard and Lieutenant Commander Data on the Baku planet from the movie, with the objective of helping with the creation of a new colony while investigating some alien ruins found below. Of course, the Romulans turn up, because, well, of course they do, and a new galaxy-threatening force is revealed, requiring the player to work through a number of locations to uncover the secrets of the planet and end the threat once and for all. The outline of the story is okay, but the actual execution of the story is questionable. It feels like the story is what a first draft for the story might look like. Like, it's not a bad plot, but you need solid writing to bring a plot to life, and this feels absent here. There's parts of the plot which call into question previously established movie facts. Like, the movie established the Baku are not keen on technology, however here they are pretty happy in a technical metropolis. The movie also established the Baku have a deep connection to the planet and hold it sacred, although it seems now they don't mind the Federation excavating it, complete with giant mining lasers. Then there's the pacing, which at best feels rushed and at worst feels disjointed. There's an early scene where the player is with Data and hears Picard contact them and ask for help. Data asks the player to follow him, and when the control returns to the player, you are forced to proceed through a combat area with no sign of Data. You eventually get to your location and hey, there's Data waiting for you. I guess he just ran really fast ahead of you and somehow avoided all the combat patrols? Or maybe he beamed there. Actually, let's not go there, as this raises more questions that are outside of the scope of this video. Now, if this was a once-off sequence, I wouldn't have given it a second thought, but the problem is, the game so frequently presents situations which just don't really make narrative sense. Before we continue, a massive thank you to everyone who supports the channel. If you enjoy this type of content, please consider liking the video or subscribing to the channel. With that out of the way, let's beam down to the Baku planet, shoot some sonar, and head back to 1999 to remember Star Trek Hidden Evil. Upon first glance, you might think that there's a fair bit in common between Hidden Evil and other Trek games like 25th Anniversary and A Final Unity. All games used pre-rendered backgrounds with third-person control. All games make extensive use of items like tricorders, and all games make use of original characters, all voiced by their real-life counterparts. But the further you go in Hidden Evil, the more you realize that while Hidden Evil takes some inspiration from these earlier titles, it goes in a completely different direction. For starters, while both of the previous titles featured some combat, it was never a focus, and even gave you a separate 3D ship combat section for the majority of it, as opposed to the pre-rendered mainline game. Hidden Evil, on the other hand, doesn't just invite combat, but it practically requires it, unless this time it's in the same pre-rendered areas from the mainline game. The controls, which are basically tank controls, similar to those found in the original Resident Evil, do a reasonable job of allowing the player to navigate during exploration-focused areas. However, combat is a very different story. The issue here is that 90% of Hidden Evil is combat, with exploration making up only 10%, meaning that for 90% of the game, you're going to be not only fighting with enemies, but fighting for any form of accurate control within the game. This issue is greatly compounded by the choices made around enemy type and placement. Now, you have a hand phaser for the majority of the adventure, and targeting this weapon is done via a sort of soft lock-on mechanic, so long as you are facing the enemy. Like with the story, the idea here is okay, but the actual execution is one of frustration. For starters, there's a lot of situations where you will step into another scene and instantly be set on by an enemy or enemies. Discounting the disorientation from tank controls, you need to follow the target and shoot at it multiple times, often requiring you to take damage owing to the firing delay between shots of your phaser. Oh, and on the phaser, you need to be holding the phaser to use it. So if you have used another item, such as a tricorder, you need to put it away and equip the phaser before you are able to fire. I guess Ensign Sovok is only proficient in using one hand at a time or something. Probably the biggest frustration this caused me was fairly early on in the game, where you need to escort a creature to another area using a special device. Keep in mind, you can't have your phaser and this device equipped. As you follow the path where you need to escort this creature, you're instantly attacked by a flying enemy, which in my case, owing to the cheap damage I had already taken in the level, thanks to the last issue, killed me instantly. Now, the creature I was escorting was actually getting in my way a bit, meaning I couldn't move backwards, so I had the smart idea of going to this area first and eliminating the enemy. Only it doesn't appear unless you are escorting the other creature, and you can only escort the other creature with the other item equipped. In the end, I decided to just run through the area, which actually despawned the enemy. Modern problems require modern solutions. It kind of goes without saying, but this problem just gets worse with more enemies on the screen and becomes more of a quest in who can tank the most damage as opposed to any real combat strategy. There is another form of combat, well, kind of. Early on in the game, you are given a tutorial on how to use the Vulcan Nerve Pinch, and I originally thought, oh, the game is going to give you the option to approach combat using stealth. Great! I actually walked around a good part of the first level with the Nerve Pinch equipped, hoping this was the case. Alas, it's not. There's probably one mission where it is both functionally possible and required to be used, and I say required because if you fire your phaser, you are instantly set on by a group of guards, which literally beat you to death. Unfortunately, the actual use of the Nerve Pinch is a mixed bag. You can use it fairly reliably on stationary enemies, but its use against moving enemies seems to have a 50-50 chance of either succeeding or the enemy being alerted and calling that group of guards to beat you to death. I don't mind the occasional stealth level, but the mechanics need to be solid and consistent to avoid player frustration. On the topic of level and environmental design, it's a tale of two halves here. The first half of the game is really good, with creative level design, varied color palettes, and a general vibe which matches the game's story. The second half of the game, well, I hope you like the color green because you're going to be seeing a lot of it. I also hope you like long repetitive corridors because you're going to be seeing a lot of them too. There's a section of the second half of the game which gave me flashbacks from the maze in Harbinger, and if you've watched my video on that, you'll know that's not a good thing. If I had to attribute where I think the effort was spent on these items, I would say 80% of effort was spent on the first half of the game and 20% on the second. It's just that much of a difference. In terms of other mechanics within the game, gone are the multiple choice dialogue trees from past games, instead replaced with cutscenes and serving up a much more linear experience. However, like the past games, there are puzzles in Hidden Evil, which range in difficulty from relatively simple to more complex, and to be fair, these are actually all quite well done, and I genuinely had satisfaction in solving them. There's one puzzle in particular which requires you to gain access to a drone, which will then follow you around and attack your enemies, and the whole process to navigate this puzzle and the solution was really rewarding and a definite highlight of my time with the game. And that brings me to the topic of my actual time with the game. Hidden Evil is a short game. Even with multiple deaths in a few sections, I got through the entire game in about 3 hours, which is very short for a game of this type. By comparison, a Final Unity, which released 4 years earlier, took me probably 10 to 12 hours, and that was 10 to 12 hours of very solid gameplay. I might be able to get on board for a runtime of just 3 hours if the gameplay was solid from start to finish, but it isn't. Hidden Evil's gameplay isn't terrible. There are passages of enjoyment and entertainment, but there's a lot of things which weigh down the experience, making prolonged time with the game an exercise in frustration as opposed to enjoyment. Probably the biggest tell that the development of the game was rushed is in its presentation, or lack thereof. There's a very bare-bones menu system without even the choice of options like audio or subtitles, as well as the absence of a cursor or indeed any use of the mouse whatsoever, which for a Windows game of this era is unusual. Mission briefings are as basic as you can get, with an audio log being played over a static display screen about the upcoming mission.
Ensign's log supplemental. Romulans have killed the scientist Zatal. While in Zatal's lab, I used a monitoring device to locate Captain Picard. My current orders are to help him cross a bridge blocked by steam.
There is the occasional cutscene which often serves to fill in more details about a mission during it, but these are far and few between, and the animation is just not equal to the standard it should be for this time period. Performance-wise, the game was fine, although I did encounter a hard crash that, despite my best efforts, I could not overcome, which occurred between a cutscene transition between two of the levels. A quick search online suggested I wasn't the only one with this problem and offered two potential solutions: either repeatedly mash the spacebar to skip the cutscene before it loads, or to use a level skip cheat. I chose the latter and continued on with my adventure. Sound is obviously a really important part of any game, and one that, regardless of the title, has always been very solid in Star Trek games. Unfortunately, Hidden Evil is the exception. While the game does feature both Patrick Stewart and Brent Spiner reprising their roles as Picard and Data, this can't elevate the rest of the game's audio into anything which I would consider competent.
While I continue my work here, I want you to take this relic to Commander Data for analysis.
Understood, sir.
Firstly, it feels like at times the voice actors were given lines without being given the context of the lines. Take a listen to this exchange and pay particular attention to Sovok's replies.
Stay away.
I'm Ensign Sovok of the Federation.
A Federation officer. I am Nadal. You must help me stop this madness.
I'll help you, but first you should explain what's going on here.
Then there's the audio mixing, with the music just pausing during selected dialogue exchanges.
To revive an alien seed.
What is this seed?
The seed is an organism.
But probably the most egregious is, well, let me play it for you and see if you can pick up on it. That's right, they used the cloaking device sound effect for a transporter. I honestly don't know how something like this could happen in a licensed game. I'm going to hope this was an error of some sort, but either way, it's not good. After spending time with Hidden Evil, I can see why it features on many Star Trek worst of lists. I can't objectively say that it is the worst Star Trek game, but I can say that of all the Star Trek games I've played, Hidden Evil was the worst experience by far. Many of the ideas the game has are quite good, but the issue is the execution of these ideas feel more like an early tech demo used for a pitch for making a game as opposed to the final product itself. I do think there was an opportunity to make a few small tweaks to the game which would have had a very meaningful impact. Things like using the mouse as a targeting device for your weapons and making some small tweaks to the story to allow it to make a little more sense. I think these two things, while likely lower in development effort than major changes, would have improved the player experience greatly. As the game stands today though, the only people I could recommend this to are die-hard fans of the movie, or those who just want to play every Star Trek game there is. For casual fans, there's simply much better experiences within the franchise to be had. But that's enough from me. Do you agree or disagree with my opinions? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.